Welcome into the Gaming Discourse. I'm Tyler Frater alongside Richard De La Cruz.
We're back.
And Chief Engineer Lieutenant Commander Connor Frater.
We never left.
It is Monday, January 1st, 2024. Hooray. Today is
We survived.
We survived
The
today.
Earth is 2024 years old today.
Exactly that age.
Burped a couple times today, too.
Today is our best of our favorite games of 2023.
No, we're predicting the future.
Yeah, so we're off. We were off last week. We'll get back to news and stuff next week. And I'll be posting this to the video portion. I'll be posting to our main YouTube channel. So if you're listening, or if you go looking for this version of the podcast on the podcast channel, it'll be hosted on our normal channel, patreon.com/The Gaming Discourse. You can support us. Richard, are you still working on changing the name of Gaming Discourse?
Yeah. It'll be ready when it's ready.
That's in the works somewhere.
Chill the fuck out, Tyler.
There.
Yeah. We'll be ready when it's ready.
No pressure.
I will not have an episode probably this week or next week, though.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
Just traveling and
You're busy. You're busy. You're a man of the world.
unfortunately.
You're a man of the world. Okay, so this year, I think was as cliched as it is, was a year of extremes. Because on one hand, you had layoffs, you had all kinds of bad stuff like that. On the other hand, you had a ton of good games, and is partially artificial because of all the delays, because of COVID and stuff the past few years. So we just had this huge rush of games. I think maybe 2007 is brought up as like the best year ever for games because you got
Grand Theft Auto 4.
Grand Theft Auto 4, Bioshock, one of the Portals maybe. I don't remember.
Mass Effect.
Halo 3.
Yeah.
But in any case,
was stacked.
yeah. But so this 2023 was one of the more stacked years ever. So what we're gonna do here is we'll go through a couple categories. We'll talk about our favorite soundtracks, our favorite games, stuff like that. Once we get to the end, we'll go through our favorite games of the year. We don't really do a game of the year. If you guys want to say what your favorite game is,
It's clear what game.
what your favorite game or Spider-Man 2 what your favorite game is or whatever, that's fine, but awards really aren't our thing. And yeah, we'll start off with a bunch of games. Oh no, Connor has one in okay, so we're gonna start off with hidden gems. Hidden gems are games that were small, maybe didn't get a ton of press, maybe are somewhat hidden, as the name suggests. So, Connor, why don't you start off with Killer Frequency, which is one of yours.
Yeah, no, you guys were just listening to a little bit of the soundtrack, but Killer Frequency is a very fun puzzle game. That's not your traditional puzzle. Like, I don't know what I mean by that, but it's all about context clues that you're getting from people that are calling into your radio station, trying to get help while the police are unavailable and there's a murderer on the loose.
So it's part like radio DJ simulator almost, and then
loosely.
Okay.
Yeah. You have like 10 songs that you can swap between, and then 4 hidden tracks that you can find scattered around the radio station. But a little bit like that. The best part of the game is your desk has infinite like crunched up paper balls, and there is a basketball hoop.
Okay.
And it keeps track of how many you make.
Oh, nice. All right. Cool.
So just while people are like panicking and fighting for your life, you just sinking threes.
Nice. Okay. And then people get murdered, and
unless you find the correct path to guide them out of their situation.
Okay.
And that's what each of the individual puzzles is can you use context clues using maps that are provided. There's like a map of the town, map of like different buildings that get faxed to you and whatnot, a map of like a hedge maze, and you're trying to guide people through these situations to avoid the killer.
Interesting. Okay. So it's a little bit horror, a little bit thriller. Sounds like it has a little bit of a comedic personality because you're like a laid back DJ. Yeah, that sounds really cool. It was developed by Team 17.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to say about it?
Play it.
Go check it out. Go play it. All right. Okay, I have a few here. I'll try and get through them relatively quickly. It Comes in Waves by Antonio Freire. I think maybe Freire. It Comes in Waves is a very short survival game. You may even consider it a survival horror game. Basically, you are a character. It's low poly, looks like a PS1 type game. You're out in a desert. and you have to run through this desert and survive and get to the end of the map. And I won't spoil what you're doing or what's going on. It comes in waves as a reference to the theme of the game, because the theme of the game is about grief, about loss. And so as you go through this really weird desert, there are all kinds of sights and weird structures, and there's a giant tree that's continuously on fire and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. There's a night and day cycle. So what the challenge of the game is that as you're running through the desert, you kind of like in, I don't know, Dune, your character runs out of water. And if you run out of water, you dehydrate and die really quickly. You have to keep finding little packets of water as you run around. At night, because it's cooler, you don't run out of water as quickly. And then during the day, you run out a little bit more. There are hazards in the desert. There are enemies that'll shoot at you. You have a gun, you can kind of shoot back. But yeah, it's a really short, maybe take you 30 minutes to complete. It took me 2 tries to finish it, because the first try I was exploring and going different ways, and I died in the desert. And the second try, though, I kind of figured out how to do it. It doesn't take very long. But yeah, check it out. It's really good. Moonring by Fluttermind. I think Fluttermind is one developer whose name is escaping me. It's a really weird, like Atari style RPG. Has interesting soundtrack and interesting concept. And you move through an overworld where you're kind of going almost like an RPG. You're traveling to, I haven't played it a whole lot, but you're like traveling to a town somewhere, and every now and then you'll find an animal, or you'll attack bandits, and then it zooms into a smaller map where you can actually do fighting and stuff. Combat is based on like not turn-based, but did you ever play Crypt of the Necro Dancer? Yeah. It's similar to that, where you jump around and you bounce off things to attack them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like every time you press something, everything goes at once. Okay. So that's how. So it's kind of
the time moves only when you move. No.
Yeah, kind of like that in a way.
Super hot is another way.
Yeah, super hot kind of. So it's interesting. It's creepy because there's this thing called amber that floats around the map that can make you go insane, and the screen turns all kinds of different colors and stuff. You have to find food and water, I think, to survive. There are different gods in the world that will give you different things if you follow their quests and stuff. I don't know. It's all very vague, and it doesn't explain a whole lot to you, and it's very difficult to. If you explore ruins, there are animals that'll straight kill you. Not animals, but like monsters that'll kill you really quickly. So you have to be careful. Yeah, it's free on Steam. Check it out. The art direction is what got me to it. Atari, like I said, Atari style. Mm-hmm. And then as I was playing, I was like, oh, this has some pretty deep systems in it. And it's actually, if you look through the Steam reviews, people are like, why is this free? Let me pay $20 or more for this, please. Yeah. Like, because it is really interesting. Okay. Teleforum. Yes, by Monumental Collab. Teleforum is a horror point-and-click game where you play, you see through the lens of a camera. So you play as a person who is part of like a TV journalist who is filming a TV journalist, and you're holding a camera, and it's got a really, like, the soundtrack is broken. It's point and click. You go to interview a woman about her husband, I think, who died or who was murdered. I don't want to spoil too much about it. It's not very long. It has multiple endings. There's some surreal horrorness about it. You'll see symbols every now and then. There's a videotape, and it's really, at one point it gets really weird because you're filming somebody watching a supposedly haunted videotape. So it's like you're filming a film, and then that has negative consequences. But yeah, just point and click. And as you play through the game, the soundtrack starts to slow down and get warped as things become more and more creepy. So that's really unsettling. And that's another free game. Go check it out. And I think they just updated it with a new, or with some free, maybe a free level or something like that. I'm not sure. Another small horror game, Exit 8 by Kotaki Create. Exit 8, Connor, have you played it?
I haven't been able to play, but I've watched some people playing it, some friends playing it.
I won't say what it is, I'll just say it has to do with liminal spaces, a little bit of SCP creepiness. It's a puzzle. It's a horror puzzle game, and that's all I'll say. Go play it. It takes place in a subway. Figuring out Exit 8 is a lot of fun. It's very frustrating. It can be, but as you figure out what's going on, it's very good. And I had a lot of fun playing through it. Yeah, first-person horror game. There can be a few jump scares depending on certain things. If you don't like jump scares in first person, but that one's like $3 on Steam. And then The Troop by Giant Flame. The Troop is Connor and I play a tabletop game called Bolt Action, World War II miniatures. The Troop is very much Bolt Action, a video game version of Bolt Action. It's World War II set in the days after D-Day. It's set on a hex grid. You move your troops around, RTS style. On your turn, all your troops go. They all attack. On the enemy turn, all their troops go. They all attack. So far, I have not finished it yet, but I've gotten pretty far into it, and so far it seems to be challenging. But if you pay attention to certain things, you challenging but fair, I guess, in a sense. I was playing the other day and I had a Sherman. I was playing as the Allies and I had a Sherman, and there was this collection of trees, and on the other side there was an anti-tank gun, which is a problem for a tank. And you can click on hexes to see what the line of sight is from that hex. So before you move a unit, you can go, if I move here, what are they going to be able to see? So this collection of trees was blocking line of sight between my Sherman and this anti-tank gun, and this anti-tank gun was protecting a crossroads, and it was completely slowing my advance down. I couldn't do anything about this stupid anti-tank gun. So I would press the point of view indicator, and I found that there's a little break in between the trees where I could get a shot off at the anti-tank gun. So I got my Sherman, turned the cannon, fired, and then that's how I was able to take out the anti-tank gun, and it was incredibly satisfying. But it's also very tense. There's one mission where you play as Stewarts, which was a light tank, and a Stug ambushes you, which is an assault gun, which was a German anti-tank tank, essentially. And it's very much the scene from Fury, where you just have to rush it and try to get to its sides. But if it rolls well enough, it'll just pick you off one at a time, and it's kind of terrifying because you just watch your tanks dink, gone, dink, gone, dink, gone, as it's like turning and firing. But if he rolls poorly, then he'll miss, and you can get side to side, and you can take him out, hit him in his side armor, hit him in the tracks, which is fun. So yeah, if you're a World War II RTS fan, it's not like Company of Heroes where you build a base, you get all your units at once, you deploy them, you move. So it's very much like a tabletop experience. If you're a fan of that kind of stuff, I would say check it out. Okay, I've talked a lot.
I had completely forgotten about The Troop. I remember playing the demo back in the early parts of the year.
And it came out in early access a couple of years ago, or last year maybe, but it released out of early access in October, I think. So
very fun.
Yeah, it's low budget. It only has one piece of music that loops, so I muted that because
that's rough.
Yeah, it's rough. But
just put on the Battlefield 1942 soundtrack in the background, and you're good to go.
That's probably what I need to do. Yeah, just have that looping instead or something. But as far as like a basic, simple RTS goes, using all these different tanks and World War II items or whatever, it's competent and seems like it's pretty fun. Okay, moving on to soundtracks. Richard, you played a lot of Honkai Star Rail.
Honkai Star Rail, yeah. Honkai Star Rail this year.
Soundtracks are kind of weird because it's kind of tough to describe a soundtrack.
It is tough to describe a soundtrack, but I think that you can describe essentially how a soundtrack will make you feel dependent on the usage of the soundtrack. And for Honkai Star Rail, most of the excitement for the soundtrack comes from generally the trailers for either the characters or the versions that come out, which are all featured on the OST. But inside of the game, they had several moments where they would use songs created for the game, usually with accompanying vocals in very important cutscenes that definitely fueled either astonishment or emotions, depending which part you're at, and I think they Hoyoverse in general, both with particularly Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail, has a very, very talented musical team that headlines these, and so Honkai Star Rail had a very good soundtrack this year.
Dead Space one for me. Dead Space does not have there's not a lot of music in it.
No.
But it has and I don't think the first Dead Space had this. I don't think the first Dead Space had any music outside of maybe the beginning and the end, and like the horror music that plays when one of the necromorphs attacks you. But it reminds me of Alien, when there are these moments where you're like getting from point A to point B, and it's like a story moment. Maybe Isaac's talking or something. There's this music, this like orchestral suite that plays that reminds me of a specific, like the very beginning of Alien. You'll hear like the dun 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 dun, like that kind of thing. It doesn't play very often, but when it does, it's like, damn, this is really good. Really tension building. Reminds me a lot of Alien. So really maybe soundtrack, that one song that it plays here and there. Really good. Richard.
Yeah.
Octopath Traveler 2.
Octopath Traveler 2. Yeah. So it's, because I have a show mostly focused on music, one thing that I have to juggle is introducing not only tracks that people know and enjoy, but also tracks that they've never heard of. Another tough layer to that is presenting aesthetic music in those playlists that I create, because music that is used aesthetically is very hard to listen to just by itself. Like there are some people who can just turn on a song that doesn't have much excitement to the track. It's just kind of like, oh, you're walking through a field and that's the song that will play. But Octopath Traveler 2, because your journeys take you across so many different locations that have, different topographies, they really utilized their focus on the music, and that's one thing that's very tough when it comes to JRPGs or lots of other action games or lots of other video games, is that sometimes the mixing, I can't hear the music because there's so many other things going on, and so the music doesn't end up becoming the focal point of the game. But Octopath Traveler 2, the team that developed it, just like Honkai Star Rail, used that to their advantage to bring these tracks to the forefront when you were ostensibly doing nothing in the game. And so I appreciated the soundtrack this year due to that reason.
So a real quick tip.
Yeah.
If you're watching, or if you're playing a game, watching a movie, like on a streaming service or something, and you're having trouble hearing it, check the sound settings, because if it's set up for 5.1 surround sound and you don't have 5.1 surround sound, it's going to sound awful.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
You're not going to hear a lot because you're trying to force everything through 2 speakers that's supposed to be going through 6.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Connor, Killer Frequency.
Again, Killer Frequency. The music that you play as the radio host, Forrest Nash, all made for the game. It's all very like modern reimagining of what 80s music
80s,
was.
Yeah.
And the majority of them have very like tongue-in-cheek jokes about the game. Like one of the songs you have to go out and find in the station is called The Last Breath, and they're all like either like 80s themed or they're like murder mystery themed, and then very fun, all very bouncy and good listen.
Okay. I liked the Diablo 4 soundtrack. I don't know why I said that like it was controversial. I guess because there isn't a whole lot of soundtrack in Diablo 4. But what was there is like really bone crushing and like deep and guttural, which I really enjoyed, and I thought it went with a lot of the combat well and stuff.
Yeah.
Diablo 4's art style, the soundtrack went with the art style really well, because the art style was a little more grounded and quote unquote realistic, whatever. And so the soundtrack sounding like something demons would listen to, I guess, made it appropriate. And it was something that it was a touch on the game that I really liked.
There was the opening cutscene when it ramps up towards the end, the song that begins to play as Lilith is being summoned is pretty pretty powerful. But yeah, you are right, because it is kind of as if they took, choir music from churches and just kind of like, well, what if we went the other direction with it? So,
but what if evil?
Yes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Richard, Final Fantasy 16.
Final Fantasy 16. I think with the comparison I made with Octopath Traveler 2, Final Fantasy is kind of on the other side, whereas this music for Final Fantasy 16, oh my gosh, is a lot more bombastic, more consistently. Final Fantasy 16, although by the time I was finished playing with it, I will go back, but by the time I finished playing it, although I wasn't as impressed with the game as I was the first couple hours I played it, one thing that stayed absolutely consistent and was essentially the front runner of the game was the music, and is the same team that created Final Fantasy, or that is working on Final Fantasy 14, which one of the main celebrated parts of that game is the music. Mm-hmm. And so I think that they knocked it out of the park with not only taking renditions of old Final Fantasy songs and just kind of putting their own spin on it, but creating new tracks that are very, for me, were very noticeable and played at the right time consistently throughout the game. So I think it was very good soundtrack.
Alrighty. Hi-Fi Rush was, for me, a game I played a lot of, and then I hit a wall and I was like, I'm not really enjoying this, even though when it's good, it's very good, but it wasn't always very good. But I thought the soundtrack was good. I thought the songs were fun. I think everything it did when it incorporated music was great. I think how it involved like your moveset, and when you had the moveset going, the sounds of his guitar hitting people and stuff,
the thwangs
went with the beats and things like that. So I thought that was all extremely well implemented. Yeah, and I think I don't think there were lyrics. Were there for any?
Yeah,
of the songs?
there were like the first boss battle is a 9 Inch Nail song.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it just came back to me.
And then there are vocals for some of the tracks. Yeah, they're very good.
Okay. Alrighty, moving on from there. I think we covered all of our games. To performance and characters that we liked. This is a tough one.
There's a long list.
Yeah, we'll get to Baldur's Gate 3 and Alan Wake 2 maybe once we get there. Why don't you, Ben Starr specifically in Final Fantasy 16?
Yeah, and this is it may sound like I'm being negative about it, but Ben Starr delivered like a really great performance as oh my gosh, I forgot his name already, the main character.
Oh geez.
Yeah. Anyways, main character of Final Fantasy 16, and the negative that I can say about that character's voice is that he is rough and grumbly man.
Okay.
However, Clive, thank you. But however, Ben Starr playing Clive, even though he had that rough and grumbly presentation, he gave Clive enough nuance that he was able to make me care about the character more than other stereotypical rough and grumbly like main characters, but also did deliver these lines at certain emotional parts that were impactful despite the seemingly standard vocal performance. But I did think that he did a wonderful job with what he was given, despite, like I said, it being what some would probably consider just like kind of a default voice for a main character.
Gotcha. Connor, killer frequency.
Yes, I have here listed as everyone because every person that called in, the murderer, your producer, the character you're playing as, all did very well. However, I do want to highlight one person in particular, Joshua Manning, when he was voicing Maurice Russell, the newspaper editor. It is the most J. Jonah Jameson that's not J. Jonah Jameson.
Very nice.
And it's if I could have added someone to the Game Awards performance, it would have been Joshua Manning for Maurice Russell, because it's ridiculous. Like I halfway through am expecting him to start shouting about Spider-Man.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I need to play this game.
You do. It's really
I
fun.
need to play this game. Okay, on to art direction. I don't know how to define art direction. The way a game looks.
Yeah.
That's the vaguest and most precise answer I'm gonna give.
I'll just continue with, because I have it on
You
here.
have killer frequency on
I have
here
killer
too.
frequency
Yeah.
on here. Again, it is 80s aesthetic, but everything is like stylized 80s aesthetic. So it's almost cell shaded. Part of it might be cell shaded if I remember right, but it's just eye candy.
Very
It's
bright
kind of
colors.
like a caricature a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Mhm.
like I mean, even
There's a lot of like neon style lighting that just makes things pop and glow.
even the main font for the game is like those like slasher like paint.
Yeah, yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, back to Hi-Fi Rush.
Yeah.
Again, the way, and I forget the main character's name in Hi-Fi Rush, but the way he moved, the way the enemies would wind up and attack, the way that you had sort of a comic book aesthetic to some of the environments, the onomatopoeia, right? You'd see like the
Pow, bam.
that kind of stuff you'd
Yes,
see here and
yeah.
there. How so many different things that you wouldn't even look at. There'd be like a traffic cone in the corner. The traffic cone is like
Hopping
bouncing
to the beat.
and stuff like that. That game just oozed personality and motion and energy everywhere, and that's what made it really, really good. That's one thing that made the art direction really, really good. That, and of course how enemies would attack and stuff like that. Richard, Bayonetta Origins.
Bayonetta Origins approach this adult version of a game, but focused on like the character when they were a child, and presented it in sort of a storybook watercolor type of art style. And I think from changing the gameplay to a third-person action title to kind of this like isometric action adventure game was a very good choice, and the watercolors absolutely pop. And I think that any of the consoles could do what Bayonetta Origins did. However, I think that it fits perfectly on the Switch itself. I think if it's one thing that the Nintendo Switch has against all the other consoles, it's developers' abilities to use different types of art styles to kind of make their games viable on the Switch, and get that, like, you know, Tears of the Kingdom, obviously, or Breath of the Wild is a good example. Also, like Super Mario Odyssey is another great example. Less is more, and I think Bayonetta Origins proved that with their art style and art direction.
Okay. I talked a little bit about Diablo 4. I really liked the way Diablo 4 looked. It still felt and played like Diablo, but it was a little less Blizzard cartoony. There was still some of that Blizzard cartooniness there, but the art direction seemed to be, the colors were drab. I don't think there's a single bright color in the entire game almost. The colors are really muted. Everything's really dour and depressing, and all the enemies don't have that like bulky toy aesthetic that you maybe see in StarCraft or whatever, or the previous Diablos. And I really enjoyed all of that. I thought it was good. I think the costumes for the characters, the different outfits,
Cosmetics,
the cosmetics, I thought all looked good. You had the druid who had antlers or like face masks built out of bones and stuff like that. It was very horror, and the game, and Diablo is kind of a secret horror game in a sense, I guess. But I really liked how they went with there, and I'm still playing Diablo 4. I hop into it every now and then, but
It's a big one. It's a big game.
Yeah, and I think I prefer that over Blizzard. Not that every Blizzard game needs to be like that, but I think I preferred that type of Diablo over like the Diablo 3. And I think Diablo 2 is an old game, so it's kind of difficult to compare.
Well, Diablo 4, if anything, is closer to the first two than it is the third game, and I think that's its biggest strength.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
Okay, Starfield. Starfield's only appearance today, unless you guys want to talk about it later. So I really liked Starfield's. Well, when it comes to spaceships, I absolutely loved the way Starfield made the spaceships feel grounded and kind of, I don't know, NASA-y.
The Nova is very much NASA inspired and nails the NASA punk aesthetic.
Yeah, and I don't like the term NASA punk because I don't understand why. Punk has a certain connotation to it. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But just the everything looking like it was made with compromises in mind. Mm-hmm. Nothing's really that beautiful. Even ships that are sleek have like weird curves and stuff like that, and weird, edges and whatnot. I really like all that. I like the way the spacesuits look. Again, all the spacesuits look like things you would actually see in history or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy all that a lot. I think we need more of that. It reminded me of The Expanse. The Expanse has very similar ships where the ships, you look at a ship in The Expanse and you don't know which part is the front sometimes. You're like, which way is this supposed to fly? And I love that. I would love more games to have that kind of style to it. And there are other games out there like that. But I really like that Starfield really leaned that direction. The bad parts of Starfield's art direction, I think, was how it handled space. I don't know. I think space, we'll talk about Everspace 2 later. You can go Everspace 2, where space it's fantasy space, right? Mm-hmm. You've got like weird crystal formations and you've got storms and all kinds of crazy things. Or you can go the Elite Dangerous direction where you're terrified all the time because everything is huge, you're tiny, and there's nothing between you and the star, just empty nothingness. And you see stars everywhere and you see the nebulas way far away. But Starfield dropped the ball on all of that, unfortunately. You go to a planet with a blue star, you land on the planet
white light.
And that's too bad because you could have some pretty creepy... It's creepy when you're on a planet to think about everything humanity has ever done, and so many of our perceptions of reality come from the fact that our star happens to be white. And how would it affect a civilization that is around an O-type star, which is a gigantic blue star, right? How incredible is that to think that so much of what we consider everyday life is just happenstance because our star is white. Mm-hmm. And there can be entire civilizations that grow up and all the light they experience is blue. And how does that affect the way they grow up? How does that affect evolution? How does that affect their cultures? I don't know.
Well, I can tell you how it affects them, because if they go to a different planet, like if they have a red star, they come to our planet and they get superpowers.
Good point.
God damn it.
Connor.
Yes.
Killer Frequency.
Well, I already talked about Killer Frequency.
You did?
Yeah, I started off with that.
I'm sorry.
But Dave the Diver, it is from the onset, it just looks like your standard pixel side scroller, but the game has that like 2.5 dimension where there's depth to the environment. Some things move a little bit quicker than others as they're in the foreground versus the background. But where the game really shines is the cutscenes when you upgrade your skills. Every cutscene is 200% over the top. I showed you guys the upgrading the sushi chef.
Yeah.
He's sharpening his blade. There's like traditional Japanese music playing in the background. A cherry blossom petal slides across the knife, cutting it in half, and you see a terrified fish in the background. Yes. And every single upgrade cutscene is as over the top.
Yeah, Dave the Diver, I have not played it, but it is one of those games where you see it and it's sort of like, it kind of hits you for a second.
That's a charming looking game.
Exactly. Yeah. Richard.
Yep.
Pizza Tower,
yeah. Plucky little game that was released earlier this year. And its art style is very American. Oh gosh, I don't know what that art style is, but basically along the lines of like Ren and Stimpy and those extreme type of animation.
90s animation.
90s late night animation.
Sure.
There
Animaniacs.
we go. That kind of thing. Yeah, and very well animated, both in the game and of course its cutscenes. It's very flashy, very like Connor's looking at screenshots right now, but the game itself is also very good, being not complete, but somewhat 1-to-1 of the Wario Land series.
Okay.
You're climbing, of course, a tower, and you're doing a lot of like charge bashing into walls and whatnot. But it has a very extreme take on like the 90s late night art style, much like Bendy and the Ink Machine does, like 1920s cartoons.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's basically kind of just an inspiration from that, but very, very good and eye-popping art style. For sure.
Okay, and I think you have the two left on here, Honkai Star Rail, and I assume Street Fighter 6 was yours as well.
Yeah, Street Fighter 6 was mine. That one was very interesting because they took a lot of cues from modern day like hip hop culture, particularly with like graffiti and whatnot. Okay. With Street Fighter 4, they did this really neat thing where they used sumie artwork from like Japanese old school like paintbrushes and stuff, and so when characters would hit each other, do certain moves, that brush would go along with it. So they do the same thing here with graffiti art. So tons of very bright, almost pastel-esque colors would appear when you perform moves just like that. Okay. On top of that, beyond the visual trappings of the like effects, you have the character models of the Street Fighter universe, which always, depending on the game, swings one way for being like semi-realistic to anime style to back and forth. And this is the first iteration that has more of a exaggerated realisticness to them. The characters are bigger than they probably should be, but for some reason look with the graphical power looks very attractive for a lot of the characters, both female and male, but they did a really great job with this game, and I think it's one of the better looking games of the year. And beyond Street Fighter 6, of course, I put Honkai Star Rail on this, and Honkai Star Rail, I think, is their main artwork specifically. The game itself is anime style, of course, but they do have these instances of presenting ethereal like aeon gods to you, and when they do, it's accompanied with a wall of text explaining like who they are. But the main artwork of these aeons give the artists a chance to create some very out there designs. There's a particular god that has something to do with not bugs, but like creatures like that can hatch out of eggs, kind of like xenomorph style.
Interesting.
And it's kind of like, this type of blob. And then there's another god who kind of has this human top torso. He kind of looks angelic, but like towards the bottom is just kind of like sludge and like all this other like
weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't seen them in game, but just their presentation when they like come to you in these visions are very attractive, and I think that was one thing that really popped out to me when it came to the Honkai Star Rail art direction. And of course, they have different worlds based off of different cultures as well. Belobog is the first place that you visit, and it's just like a snow-covered blizzard, like European type setting. That's kind of in this like eternal slumber of frozen nothingness. But all of the buildings and everything are really, really nice. It's great art direction on that one. Okay.
Next up are our favorite VR games. There are a couple VR games this year that I didn't play. I didn't play The Seventh Guest, which I need to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure Resident Evil 4 VR is incredible.
I could probably play that soon, actually.
I haven't gotten around to playing that one yet. You said Light Brigade.
I like the Light Brigade.
You've got it, and one of your favorite games of the year, so we'll save it for that. I'll talk really quick about Vertigo 2. I did a review of the Vertigo series. Vertigo 2 came out this year. Vertigo 2 is a comedic sci-fi shooter, very much in the vein of Half-Life Alyx, structured a similar way. The visuals and gameplay are great, but it is modeled so closely after Alyx that a lot of the same reservations I have for Alyx, I have for Vertigo 2. I don't like how slow Alyx's combat is. I think it can kind of be limiting. And when you play something like Half-Life 2 in VR, then you go back and play Half-Life Alyx, Alyx just doesn't feel different. I think it just feels slower. And so I feel like Vertigo 2 suffered from some of that as well. You can't like sprint in Vertigo 2, and I would absolutely love to sprint. You can use your teleportation to sprint, but that's not the same feeling because it takes you out of it for a couple split seconds. Yeah, if you teleport 50 feet, that's 5 different button presses, and once you get to the other side, you have to like find where you are for a split second, as opposed to sprinting where you can sprint and shoot at the same time. That's really energetic and fun. But the visuals were great. The story is phenomenal. The writing is really funny. And some of the set pieces were really cool. There was a lot that happens in Vertigo. At one point, you're in a flying ship, and you're at the tail gunner, and you've got other like airplanes coming after you, and to shoot them down. You fight enemies that are as big as a T-Rex, and you fight other enemies that are really small, tiny little guys. It had me keeled over laughing at one point. I'm gonna spoil something small here, but there are enemies in the game that are just hot dogs. Because the Vertigo 2 is like this weird thing where there's a bunch of universes colliding, like the multiverse or whatever. So there's a part where you run into these they're like hot dog ATF agents, and they all have like sunglasses and machine guns, and they're like there to bust a drug cartel or something. It's very funny, and I didn't know it doesn't announce their presence at all.
Yeah.
So I turned a corner and I was like, it looked like there were a bunch of like pipes sticking out of the ground, and I was like, what the hell are these things? And then they started hopping around, and I as soon as I figured out that they were hot dogs carrying guns, I don't know why, it's just the absurdity of it was hilarious. And when you shoot them, they pop into like hot dog halves and stuff. It's very funny. Oh. And they wear t-shirts. I think one of them says like you can't smoke these buns, some kind of innuendo like that. And it's just a very small part of the game. But Vertigo 2, I recommend it. I have my I have things I don't like about the game, but a very good VR game if you're looking for a single player VR shooter. Very good. Okay, so let's get to our our favorite games of the year. Connor, you haven't talked about Killer Frequency yet.
I haven't.
Do you have anything else you want to say about Killer Frequency?
One thing I did want to bring up after I talked about in Hidden Gems, you can beat the game in 4 hours. It's not a long game. You can take it, like, I ended up beating it like closer to 6.5, 7 hours because I had some fail states and I wanted to go back and save everyone.
Gotcha.
It's engaging the entire way through. You'll beat it in one sitting, and you'll probably want to go back to try and get all the collectibles. If you don't save scum and save everyone, you might want to go back through and try and save everyone. Yeah, very fun game. Highly recommend it. It's by the team that made like Overcooked. So
I didn't know that.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, Team 17.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't. Well, does Team 17 have multiple
They're a
development
publisher,
studios?
I think, because they do Worms as well.
Yeah.
So I think they're a publisher.
Well, I don't know.
Like publisher and like a publisher.
But yeah,
developer?
I don't know if they have like multiple in-house developing teams or if they just have one. I think they did develop this because on their on Killer Frequency Steam page, I think it lists
Gotcha.
Team 17 as the developer. So, in any case, Richard, the Light Brigade. Tell us about the Light Brigade.
Light Brigade is a game that I actually really fell in love with and actually got back into again quite recently, but. Essentially a tale of the world ending essentially in kind of like a World War II-esque era. But in this like universe, their religion and science is kind of like at odds. And so science is basically like, hey, the light is going out, like the sun is going out, like we got to do something. But yet, the religious aspect is like, okay, no, we're going to shut this down, like you're gonna be arrested, executed, etc., etc. So you play as someone who is on the side of the religious, the Light Brigade is what they're called, and they're hoping to bring the light back. And with this one, it was a really good roguelike shooter featuring guns similar to that of Lugers and M1 Grands and stuff like that. Throughout the game, you acquire tarot cards that are your buffs that you can like kind of crush and attach to yourself. You would get charms that you can put at the end of like your barrel or your oh my gosh, I forgot what it's called. Your stock. To buff your either magic abilities or your hitting power with your bullets, but going through and fighting enemies that are both terrifying at some points and also annoying. There's lots of birds who are bombs, like they're like eagles, and they don't have bombs, but that's just what they do. Like when they hit, they just explode.
Okay,
these aren't birds; they're bombs.
They're bombs.
They're made in a bomb factory.
Yeah. So, it ended up being something that I got connected to, and I kind of, I don't want to say liken it to, I guess I would liken it to not After the Fall, Until You Fall, the other VR game. Sure. That's a roguelike, a sword roguelike shooter. But yeah, that ended up being a game that I spent a lot of time on this year and have gone back to, like I said, recently, and started playing again. With more, they added more updates too. I mean, there's silly things like you can open up a chest. No, there's a helmet. You can put the helmet on. That gives you like a little more armor. Or like, hey, there's this box, and like when you open it up, it's like 3 cigars and a cigarette, and you have to like light the cigar and like put it in your mouth, and it gives you like a tick of health every like 20 seconds or 10 seconds.
Okay, interesting.
So there's small, really neat touches. It's not something that's as intricate as like Walking Dead Saints or Sinners or Half-Life Alyx, but it is a game that brought me a good amount of enjoyment this year, especially for a VR title.
What is the combat like? Are you running and gunning?
No. It depends on. So you have different classes. You have, of course, like a rifleman class who does start out with like the M1 Garand, and then you have a side pistol. And then there's like, a pistolier who you get 2 pistols. It's not necessarily run and gun because you can encounter other enemies that have more abilities than you do. Like you said, there was something terrifying just recently. Last week, I was playing a run and I got to the next area, and there happened to be, I don't know how to explain him. He was a very tall, he was like a giant. He was about twice the size of a normal enemy, but he was very huge, lanky, flat color. Like flat brown, no eyes, no nothing. Just
that sounds creepy.
Yeah. You know what? I'm sorry, and I know you're gonna laugh. Think the aliens from South Park, but if they were just like flat, and he just like would just slowly walk towards me, and he would fire something from like he would charge something, a beam, and then like shoot it, and I killed him, and that was great. But then even further, there was one maybe 3 times the size of that one that filled like the entire level that I had to fight.
Oh wow, okay.
And I wasn't expecting. I've never seen that before until that run, and so I was kind of like very much like hiding behind cover and like kind of poking out and like shooting when I could. You do get magic abilities depending on like your class, but it's usually relinquished to like a single use item that has to recharge. But it's a simple shooter. I mean, as soon as you get to learn how to play, it doesn't change too much from just standard going through a level. You cannot run and gun, you will die. Okay. But there's lots of looting, there's lots of like take cover. Sometimes you'll fight 3 or 4 enemies at a time that you have to be smart with. Sometimes they have wolves that can encroach your space very quickly because that's what they do.
Interesting.
So you have to like think on your feet and make sure all of your weapons are reloaded before you engage because you will get caught up. But I enjoyed it a lot.
Okay. So another David Szymanski game caught my eye this year, Squirrel Stapler.
He's just pumping them out, isn't he? No, I'm just kidding.
Which I think he maybe makes 1 game a year, and he helps out with other projects.
This is not to be confused with Squirrel with a Gun, right?
No, yeah, not to be confused with Squirrel with a Gun. So Squirrel Stapler is it's a horror game. It's comedic. It's very creepy. You do the name is not metaphorical. There is one thing I love in the game. Yes, Connor's looking at it right now. So the game is played over 5 days, right? And you go out, you have to hunt squirrels, you come back, you sleep, you go out the next day. Each day, something in the world changes. Okay. When you go to bed at night, you lay down in bed, and this really loud, like, night ambience plays, where it's like with crickets, and on the screen appears just an image with a black bar with red text that says "You are sleeping," and there's this like low poly stretched image of a squirrel that plays.
Chunky squirrel
that just flashes on the screen and then goes away. So like a lot of games, it's or like some of Szymanski's other games, it's got a lot of dark humor. It's very creepy. It doesn't take very long to finish if you want to. It's maybe an hour long.
It's a nature game.
The creepiness.
That's what Steam has it tagged. It's a nature game.
Yeah. It's I think in some ways it's almost a parody of hunting games in a sense, because you walk out and there's the way you learn how to play the game, there's a tutorial paper floating, and you walk into it and it appears on screen, and when you touch it you get like a southern guitar sting like that.
Oh, nice.
You know, like it's a hunting game tutorial, and then you go out and you just murder squirrels, you know. So I would highly recommend it. David Szymanski, another, it seems like every couple years we get a funny.
Yeah, the horror seems to come 100% from the surrealism of
There's
of this
that.
one.
There is some creepy stuff that happens later. Stuff comes after you. Well, I'll put it this way: the squirrels don't appreciate that you're murdering them.
Yeah, I'd imagine they don't. Yeah.
So things begin.
Oh, he made Dusk?
Yeah. Oh, I think he worked on Dusk.
Oh, he worked on Dusk. Okay, yeah, that explains a lot. Then.
Gloom. What's the
Gloomwood.
Gloomwood is another one
yeah.
he's working on. Iron Lung, I think he made by himself. I think Squirrel Stapler too. Chop Glevins, I think he did by himself as well. I don't know though. But yeah, Squirrel Stapler, go check it out. Connor, you had another one on here. Did you? No, you didn't. Richard, tell us about Pizza Possum.
I did, but it's Baldur's Gate 3.
Which we'll get to in a little
save
bit.
for later.
Yeah.
Pizza Possum is incredibly simple. It actually got a lot of press earlier this year, but very much in the same vein of Overcooked and the like. You play as a possum who is trying to get a very, very large pizza that's the ruler of the land is like making on top of like a mountain. If you play co-op, the second player is a raccoon.
Oh, nice.
But you both are traversing essentially what is... I'm trying to avoid using the word tower, but you basically have like a coastline, and then it's kind of like, it feels like a mountain going up. Think the food pyramid.
Oh,
so like you start there, but like you kind of go up, like
okay,
at
sure.
the top is where. But while you're going through, there are police dogs that are like kind of like searching for you, and if you go into their vision, they'll chase after you. So you're trying to go from point to point, stealing food as you go along, which will upgrade your little progress bar that you have, and relinquish to you certain abilities you have. There's one that if you have multiple like police dogs following you, you can drop a was it? I forgot what it's called. Not a workhorse. Is it a workhorse? Like where you like
sawhorse?
Yeah, sawhorse. Yeah, not a sawhorse. I'm sorry. But well, anyways, you could drop one of those with like caution tape on it, and it like stops the dogs, and they're like, well, I can't go past this. You know,
That's funny.
So there's lots of really like cute things. But as you go up, more dogs get released. As you go up, more like you'll go to a vineyard, and that area is maze-like because of the way vineyards are set up. But the whole goal is to just progress up this area to get to the pizza while you're eating everything upwards of it, or from your areas. But it's really fun, especially with another person. It's very hectic, very funny, very charming, and it's only like $6. It's a very fun game though.
Okay.
I think you just introduced my partner to their favorite new game.
Good. Yeah, no, it's very fun. Very fun.
Okay, I'm going to try and run through a couple really fast.
Lightning
here.
round.
I don't want to go through them too fast because they're all good. By the way, I forgot to mention, we weren't mentioning, well, I wasn't mentioning developers, but Pizza Possum developed by Cozy Computer.
Yeah.
Funkatronic Labs is Light Brigade. Obviously, we talked about David Szymanski. Chia by Awa. It's Awa Seb or Awa Keb. I'm not sure. Chia is a very charming open world third-person action game where you play as a little girl named Chia, who it's inspired by Breath of the Wild, but it has a lot of other things that I think are pretty unique about it. It's based on an actual place called New Caledonia, which is a little island nation state. An island nation state, an island nation, whatever. An island that's a country.
Yeah.
And whatever. And I think it's like off the coast of like a couple 100 miles off the coast of Australia or maybe New Zealand. Yeah. One of those, down there somewhere.
Over there.
Yeah, over there, where
South
they filmed The
Pacific.
Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, down there. No, but it's very charming. The game, what makes it interesting is you take control of like the animals and stuff. Chia has an ability where she possesses animals.
Oh, okay.
And you kind of become that thing. So if you're flying around, if you want to get around an island and you see a bird, you can take control of the bird and fly. And then once you get above your objective, you can sort of jump out of the bird and float down.
Okay.
With like a parachute thing she has. You can take control of deer. If you see a deer run past you, you can inhabit that. And you can take control of objects too. The enemies in the game are these really interesting looking fabric enemies. It's like they have like flowing fabric that makes their bodies, and they attack you with like strands of fabric. And so what you do to attack them is they'll have lanterns at their little outposts, and you possess the lantern and you hop around as a lantern, and then you can sort of aim the lantern and shoot it. And when you shoot the lantern, Chia pops out of the lantern, but the lantern flies and explodes.
The propulsion.
Really interesting, like way that they do combat and stuff like that. There's sailing in the game. There's a couple different islands, and one of the main ways you explore is through sailing. So you open your sails. You have a little sailboat with like one sail on it. You open your sail and you hit the waves, and it's a gorgeous game. The colors are super vibrant. What else? Let's see. The story is really charming. The cinematics are fantastic. It's actually stunning how good these cinematics are, because there's so much personality in them. There's one part where the story of the game is that the island has some mean, like, demon spirit that is oppressing the people, and Chia's father is captured by this spirit, and Chia wants to go get her dad back. So at one point she's petitioning to meet the king or something, and there's a really funny cutscene where she enters like a waiting room, and there's no dialogue. It's like it's either subtitles or it's body language. And there's this like cutscene where she kind of explains she's there for her dad, and the receptionist like lays down a ton of paperwork, and Chia has to sign it. And so Chia starts to sign like the first thing of paperwork, and then the receptionist slides another one in, and so it becomes this chaotic thing where she's like signing paper, tons and tons of paper, and it goes nuts. Very charming, very Pixar-esque. Music is a big factor of the game, so you will you kind of experience. It's based on New Caledonia, so I assume a lot of it is based on the culture, the music, the food, stuff like that. So when you get missions to go meet a character, and instead of it being like a mission where you go attack something, it's like you go to a village, you say hi, and then the village has a barbecue that night, and they get together and they sing a song. And it's a really simple music sequence where there's a radial menu, and the notes come down, and you hit the analog stick and you press X to play the note, just like that. And all the songs are fantastic. So they play these little music videos, and that's basically your mission. It's just you can sit back and listen to the music, or you can like try and interact with it. Very basic rhythm-based game. It's a really charming like coming of age story. I have not finished it yet. But yeah, it's very much inspired by Breath of the Wild. Chia has stamina that determines how long she can float in the air or whatever. If you find stamina fruits, and eat them, she can increase her stamina and stuff. Highly recommend it. Got good reviews when it came out, and I think it's one of the PlayStation games as well.
Yeah.
Star Wars Jedi Survivor I really liked. I talked about it a lot. Technically, it had a lot of problems. It was not well optimized. Not well optimized right now, at least last time I played it. But I thought the combat was excellent. I thought it was a huge improvement on the first game. I thought the story was better. What you do with a Star Wars story, I think, is fraught because you have to deal with, like, because, you know, Cal Kestis's story is set in between 3 and 4. Mm-hmm. So everybody knows what happens after Cal Kestis' story. Everybody knows what happens before it. So what do you do to fit Cal into that universe? Not easy. But a Jedi who was pushed to the point of, you know, to survival, what do you do? And I said this in a podcast a few months ago, but there's a speech in Andor. It's like one of the most important scenes in the entire series, where a rebellion spy, somebody calls the spy a hypocrite because the spy is doing things that the Empire would do. And the rebellion spy sort of responds by saying, the Empire has done the worst thing to me. They forced me to use their tools to defeat them. And so because of this, I'm irredeemable. I'll never see the light of day again. I won't bear the fruits of winning this war, but the people that after me will. The people that come after me will. It's a very, like, important speech. And I think Jedi Survivor is trying to do that as well, because the Empire is so overwhelming. They're everywhere. They've done so much damage. And it's like Cal is just trying to make a life for himself. And what is he willing to do? What are other characters willing to do? I think that's an interesting story, and it had an interesting ending. Not perfect, but good. Kept me engaged. And yeah, the combat was... I don't remember the last time I played a Star Wars game where you played as a Jedi, and I was standing, like, chest to chest with a boss and just hacking back and forth. Block, block, attack, block, block, attack. Because usually in games, you swing and, you don't know, you're playing like God of War. You swing, you're far away, you swing, you're far away, whatever. But this one, it was up close and personal a lot of the time, and that was just really exhilarating and really fun. Do we want to talk about Tears of the Kingdom? I mean, I'm sure we do, but I have it on here. I don't know.
We can talk about Tears. I mean, it's still a great game.
Okay.
But it is, yeah, like, I mean...
We are certified Tears of the Kingdom haters, not really.
No, not haters, but I don't know what to talk about like that really improved with Breath of the Wild. The building is excellent, like, it's absolutely excellent. But it didn't, for me, bring anything to... It was just another mechanic, but in game there wasn't really a purpose for it. Does that make sense? Story-wise?
Yes. It does.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're going.
And although I do like the above ground and underground, when you look at the entire picture, there's nothing underground. Like, there's literally nothing underground. Kind of no reason for you to be down there, besides a couple, like, spots.
Yeah,
like,
you can find, like, clothing and
yeah, you can find a couple things, but I mean, if it's kind of like the problem that Starfield kind of has, like, they try to do too many things and didn't focus on special things, whereas they basically made the entire map again on the bottom. But if they just, like, kept those specific areas to those entrances just for, like, that part, it probably would have... I probably would have enjoyed it more, because going from A to B in the darkness, there's nothing. But that was it's my gripe with, like, the underground portion. I have not finished Tears of the Kingdom. I enjoy it. Part of my issue is that I'm not a huge fan of the combat. Yeah,
I thought it was fine in Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, the combat's almost exactly the same, and so it's tough for me to get into because I avoid combat, not because it's difficult, but because I don't always find it that fun. It's like, I just don't like it. So that's part of the problem. And I don't know. When I think about, like, for example, Jedi Survivor, how good the combat was, it was like I was excited seeing enemies. I was excited when I saw an enemy that I'd have to figure out or whatever, or a difficult collection of enemies. And in Tears of the Kingdom, I just don't have that same drive. I will say with the building, what makes it interesting is that it's emergent, right? So you click a thing on the map, you got to go there. How do you get there? Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah.
Maybe one player has a bunch of stuff in their inventory where they shoot a rocket and they hop onto it somehow. They put a seed on it or whatever, and that's how they get to the thing. I do wish that it was easier to work with, because you have a battery and that battery runs out. and you have to upgrade that battery, and to do that you have to do a bunch of different stuff, and I wish that were a little easier. So yeah, I think some of the environments are stunning. I loved each area. And what they did with some of it, the mining car sections and stuff are awesome.
Very cool.
I love that one way they incorporated that building into the gameplay. The puzzles I think are fantastic. But like the little leaf guys,
the Koroks,
the Koroks, yeah, those guys. I love how each of them, they challenge you to figure out how to get point A to point B with putting those items together. And Connor's laughing because I told Connor a story about I had to get a Korok up a cliff, and then the cliff, it wasn't like a flat cliff, it was like a mountainous cliff, like really steep, couldn't climb up it. So what I did was I created a platform, put a balloon on it, and then to put one of those fans. And so my idea was I would raise, and then I would hit the fan and turn the fan on, and I would go. But it wasn't aligned properly. So like as I was getting close to the edge of this canyon, it wasn't like lining up with it. So I was going to fall on the edge and just slide down. And it got really intense because I'm like hitting the fan and trying to shift the weight. And the way I explained it to Connor was like that scene in Apollo 13 where they have to make the burn. And Tom Hanks has to keep the Earth like in his little reticule. And he's like, give me 5% burn, 5% burn, turn. And Kevin Bacon's like, oh fuck, I messed up, man. And that's exactly what this was like, because I'm trying to get this like poor Korok over, and he's like, woohoo! And I'm like, give me 5%, god damn it! Like, we're gonna miss the fucking mountain. Anyway,
I was thinking about the time that you just attached a Korok just to a rocket and just fucking full send.
I hope I have all these clips to play. Yeah, I attached a Korok to one of the gliders with a rocket, and I stood on it, and it took off, and it just slid out from underneath Link, and that Korok just just
into the danger zone,
just danger zoned out of there, nowhere to be seen again. No, I think I found it later, but so that stuff is fun.
Yeah,
but it is difficult for me to when I run into fighting enemies and I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And there's so much of that. Did you guys fight the one stunning piece of design are the dudes made out of blocks?
Oh, yes. Yeah, did fight those.
Those are fantastic.
They are very cool.
Those fights blow my mind.
Yeah.
They're difficult, ton of fun, really creative. That might be combat there is phenomenal. I loved that. But like,
it's a puzzle on its own.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle on its own. I like the boss fights. Connor, you and I have differences, but I thought the boss fights that I encountered were really fun. The fights themselves were like a smaller portion of a larger thing. So that's how I kind of contextualized it. But yeah, Connor, do you want to say anything about Tears of the Kingdom? Don't say anything that'll give us death threats, obviously.
It's the worst game ever made. Anyone who likes it doesn't have taste in video games.
Whoa!
I feel that it suffered from a lot of the same issues that Call of Duty 3 suffered from. It feels like it was planned. I'm sure it was planned to be a full functioning game on its own, but it feels like it should be an expansion to Breath of the Wild rather than its full game.
Okay. Interesting. I don't know if I agree.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a Breath of the Wild stan.
What do I know? I'm just a musician.
Maybe I'm just a Tears of the Kingdom stan.
It does feel bad, like pointing out, like it's supposed to be like it was one of the best games of the year, but
and
we're pointing out
and
I agree, we're pointing out all the negatives though. But it's but yeah, no, it's a wonderful achievement, especially on a now 6-year-old console.
Yeah,
and I think another one of the biggest problems I had is I liked the story in Breath of the Wild. I liked how I had to piece it together. And this one, they got a little more ambitious with the story they had to tell.
They did, yeah.
But unfortunately, at least this is my negative. The way it is conveyed to you is by capturing the tears in each of the
zones.
Yeah, the zonai, prop things. But it's all out of order. Like if you don't go to the ones that are in order, you're going to get told the story out of order. Like it doesn't give it to you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So you can reveal very major situations that you have no context for previously. I think that the revelations or the effect of it is diminished because of that. Which I felt that if you just went to any random one and it just showed you what each of the cutscenes were chronologically, I think it would go over better. But I feel like nobody's complaining about that. Like I'm the only one who's complaining about that. But
yeah, it doesn't bother me too much. But I will agree that the story is kind of awkward because it has to write in a way to like reset everything, right? Because you've read the world of all these bad guys. So what do we do next?
Surprise, more bad guys.
There's another bad guy, and then Link. It's a creative way to show why Link has to build his like hearts and stamina again. I think you don't need a reason for that. It's a game. It's a sequel. We understand. God of War.
It's not New Game Plus.
God of War doesn't give you a reason that you have to build up Kratos' abilities. That's a video game, and that's a video game debate. Do we need narrative reasons for why we need gameplay things? I don't think so, but I do appreciate that they. I don't hate that they did it. I just don't think that they needed to. I guess, which maybe sounds stupid. I don't know. Okay then. Let's see, Richard.
Hey,
why don't you tell us about Octopath Traveler 2? You've already talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, talked about it a little bit, but I think that Octopath Traveler 2, I will say, you use the phrase "got the short end of the stick" this year, being released so early in the year, right before all these huge releases, and I think that there is some spotlight to be had for Octopath Traveler 2, especially if you're a JRPG fan, and a good storytelling fan as well. In my opinion, Octopath Traveler 2, just like the first one, has 8 different stories with 8 different perspectives. However, this time around, they did a better job at conjoining those stories, or at least if you pick up another character, you can experience their stories in several ways. And I appreciate it because if I were to be the cleric character, I forgot his name, but I met the thief randomly, and as soon as you meet them, it will tell you, hey, do you want to learn their story right now? Like, and then you could choose yes or no. And if you say no, they go, okay, cool, just go to the bar, like the inn, like bar area, and you can hear it as one of the bar stories, like a story that gets told when you guys are like hanging out at the inn or something. So they save room for you to experience every piece of the story at your leisure. On top of that, I probably could have put it in the art direction, but just like Square Enix has been doing, it is a 2D HD game. So you have something that is familiar to those who are a fan of the retro Super Nintendo era, like graphical stylings, but just in a much more modern, like prettier setting with all the particle effects that you're looking for. Huge bosses and enemies compared to your character that just really pop on the screen. But each of the character stories were completely engaging, and the interactions that they have with each other are just so charming. And the battle system itself is also something that, with most JRPGs, you can kind of ram your head into the wall and get through a game just by like making your character glass cannons. But in this one, you do have that. You do have those bouts of, okay, well, do I want to reserve my attack this time and get 2 attacks next turn, or do I want to save it for 4 turns and then get 4 attacks, 4 turns down the line? So you have choices regarding on how to approach each of the fights that you encounter. But I think that Octopath Traveler 2 was one of the biggest games of the year that is probably not going to get looked at.
Lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, lost in the shuffle. That's
and it's not its own fault. It's not its fault.
It's not. It's not. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Any other year, as a lot of other titles would say.
Yeah.
Any other year.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to talk about BattleBit. I don't know. On Steam, it lists Sergeant Okidoki Velasquez and the Liquid Horse. I don't know if those are people or studios or both. But BattleBit, I really appreciated because it's just Battlefield. There are things that I don't like about it. There are things I really like about it. But I'm fine with the art style. I don't mind the Roblox type low poly art style. I don't mind that at all. I was having a ton of fun, and it reminded me it's just Battlefield. I would take an objective. I knew where the enemy was coming from, so I'd watch doors and paths and wait for enemy squads to appear and get into firefights. It was you could have reskinned it, and it was like I was playing Bad Company 2. Very similar. Destruction, you had destructible buildings and stuff, so it was really neat because, you know, if there were two huge apartment buildings next to each other, you could have hit the wall with your hammer, hit the wall on the other building. It's only like 2 feet apart, and you could hop, and then you could be in the next building or whatever. Yeah. You could, I don't know, if you were holding. I remember I was playing one game that the levels are really dense. The buildings are really dense. There's like 5-story buildings with tons of apartments in them and stuff. And I remember I was holding. We were trying to take an objective, and the objective is in the middle of an apartment complex that's sort of a rectangle, and it's like a 4-story building. And I remember I was holding a specific floor, so to help me hold it, I destroyed the stairs so nobody could come up behind me. Yeah. And then I planted a spawn point like in a corner and built up sandbags around it, so that if the walls got destroyed from outside, the sandbags would block it. Right. And it's all it's Battlefield. So I really appreciated that. And I hope I know they're successful, but I hope whatever they do next, it continues to be really good. Richard, let's break down Resident Evil 4 real quick.
Sweet.
So I'll let you go first.
I don't know what I like. So this is
we're getting, and just like at this point we're gonna get into games that we've talked a lot about this year. So we're gonna be repeating stuff.
Yeah, whatever. Of course. And as we've said before, Resident Evil 4, just like Resident Evil 2, is the way that you just plain and simply create a remake. If you wanted it to be somewhat one-to-one, you kind of just take out what didn't work and enhance things that did work. And Resident Evil 4 did every single one of those through the graphics, through character models, voice acting, and even somewhat shuffling of situations, enemies, or bosses. And in one interesting case for the DLC separate ways, they ended up taking out a boss from the main Resident Evil 4 series and implanting it into Ada's story. In a different way, but making it so that boss fight isn't a point of contention with fans. So Resident Evil 4 VR we played last year or 2 years ago.
I don't know. The past 3 years have been one hell of a year.
There's a certain boss at the end of the game where you have to kind of duck and weave through shipping containers as he's like chasing you through like a maze.
Yes.
Very annoying boss fight. Most people don't like it. So that boss they took and put into Ada's DLC. Did you play Ada's DLC?
I did, yeah. So very good.
So the U3, I think it was called. But they redid him so that he's kind of just more of a standard enemy, but he's more enjoyable. But anyways, we gush all day about Resident Evil 4, but I mean, a 20-year-old game now that has seen so many sales and so many people have played it, I don't think there's much else to go on. Yeah. Other than saying that it's one of the best remakes, alongside of Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, and I think one of the troubles that maybe Capcom is going to have, and it might be the same trouble they had when Resident Evil 4 first came out, was that what do you do after that?
Yes.
Because it's so good. But at the same time, Resident Evil 2, which is much more of a survival horror, Resident Evil 4 is survival horror too, but it's a little more action-y. There's more guns, stuff like that, more set pieces. Where do you go? What do you do with those things? Because both games proved that people love the more hardcore survival horror in RE2. And now we've seen, okay, but people also love the ridiculousness of RE4. So what do you do with Resident Evil 9? what do you do with Resident Evil 5?
Yeah.
Do you straight up
Add
remake
more
it?
boulder punching.
Do you straight up remake it? Is it just a game where Chris Redfield is punching boulders?
Hell yeah.
And that's it?
Yes, it is.
Time, baby.
uppercut to those boulders.
It's just a fight. What's that old Mike Tyson game? Famous
Punch
Mike
Out?
Tyson.
Punch Out. Yeah.
It's Punch Out, but it's just all the guys
all
you fight are
boulders.
just boulders.
Bang.
So I don't know what they're gonna do.
And that's dangerous because a precedent has been set.
Yes.
Like people think that if they do another remake of anything, it's going to be upon the same level, the same polish, the same. And they almost screwed it up with Resident Evil 3, which I still think is a very good game.
Yeah, that one I did.
It may not be a great remake of the third game, but I still think it's a great game on its own.
Okay, I agree. Yeah, I agree with you. I think they should just. Yeah, that's going to be a discussion that people that have been working at Capcom for years are probably having right now, maybe.
Yeah.
Is do we just remake Resident Evil 5 or do we make a brand new, do we do a reboot / remake of Resident Evil 5?
Yeah.
And where do we go from there? I don't know. But yeah, Resident Evil 4 was phenomenal. Everspace 2, I think, is my Octopath Traveler 2 in the sense it got lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
Everspace 2 was fantastic. Gorgeous game, fantasy space, extremely colorful, and much like, well, you know what, not really like BattleBit, but it nails what it's trying to do. It wants to be Diablo in space, but it doesn't feel. So you're looting, you blow up a ship. You get new stuff all the time, but it doesn't feel useless. You're not constantly upgrading everything. You'll find a new engine, then. An hour later, you'll find new shields. An hour later, you'll find a new weapon, and it cycles and cycles. So every time you find an upgrade that you like, it's meaningful because you're not going to find another upgrade for that thing that you like until 5 hours later or whatever. So when in a looter shooter, it's like every hour you get a gun that's better or whatever. In Everspace 2, I thought they balanced all that really well. The combat was fantastic. The story was really well done, I think. Not incredible, but incredibly well done, I guess. And it was just, you had planetary environments now. You would zoom in on a planet and you could fly above the ground and you could fly into caves and stuff. I think they just nailed every aspect. It was just solid all the way around. There were some things that I wish they added. They didn't have black holes this time around, which I was a little disappointed by. Because that was terrifying in the first game. The environments weren't as diverse as it was in the first game. Kind of wish they would have brought some of that back. But yeah, when it came to the teeth gritting space combat dogfights, it was really enjoyable. Adam and Hive, I described in my review of the game, is the banter that they have together is very much of Nathan Drake and Spock had conversations all the time. That's what their banter is like. It's fantastic. Hive is his onboard AI. Adam's the main character. Hive is the AI, and they, jab each other in the ribs and stuff all the time, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I played the demo, and then once I played the game and I was into it, I was just like, it's so good. It's just so well made, so smooth, and I was so happy for Rockfish. Because Everspace was their first game, and I think Everspace 2 was sort of the game that is closer to the game that they've always wanted to make. So whatever they do afterwards, I'm really excited for. I think there's going to be a DLC with some stuff coming out soon. Yeah, I really can't. If you like space games, I really can't recommend it enough. Okay, a few more for me real quick. Cocoon, phenomenal puzzle game. Cocoon, there is no dialogue. It's all environmental storytelling. The art of it is matte. There's not a lot of shiny things in it, which is interesting because the world is biomechanical. So when you think of biomechanics, you think like, I don't know.
Evangelion.
That, or you think of things that are partially fluidic, right?
Yes.
Because human bodies have fluids in them. Mm-hmm. But that's really not the case in Cocoon. It's like plasticky and elastic, which is really interesting. it reminded me in a weird way, it reminded me of Scorn because Scorn is also biomechanics. So you have a similar idea, but Cocoon is like Saturday morning biomechanics, where Scorn is like, I don't know.
Giger biomechanics.
Erotica biomechanics. But the stories are similar too, in that you don't really know who you are. You're like a little bug guy, and you're not really sure what you're doing, but you feel like your job is some kind of worker or drone.
Okay.
As you go through the world. And it ends in a really interesting way. I won't spoil it, but the puzzles are really good. I don't know if you guys know what the premise of the puzzles are.
No clue.
I don't know if I want to spoil that either, because it's really cool to discover it. So I'll just leave it at that. Cocoon's very good. Go play it. Talos Principle 2, I think, is one of the best sequels of all time. Another game that's going to get lost in the shuffle. The Talos Principle is a weird game to make a sequel about, because it had such a open-ended ending that it's like, how do you funnel that into one thing? And they did it, and they did a phenomenal job. It's an incredibly meaningful game about not just finding purpose, but like, discovering like a discussion about what humanity is, and a discussion about what's important to humanity, and where do we get the things that make us, our names, our genders, whatever, all that kind of stuff. In Talos Principle 2, there is a city, New Jerusalem. That's the new city that the androids have built for themselves. And the androids, they take names, voices, genders. They have conversations on a bench, even though they're digital, and they could just talk to each other in their heads. So it's all very interesting. The puzzles are great. Yeah, go watch my review. Talos Principle 2, phenomenal. One of the best games this year. System Shock, the System Shock remake, another remake. I'm not going to be able to summarize why System Shock is important, besides that it basically invented video games in a sense. But the remake is very good so far. It stays true to the original in a lot of ways. And I'll tell you my favorite part of the remake thus far. Okay, System Shock is cyberpunk, but it's like real cyberpunk in the sense that it's anti-authority. You play as a hacker who's just known as Hacker, and the hacker is not a good person. Shodan does not escape by her own actions. But at the very beginning of the game, you're in your apartment building, and the hacker is like on his laptop doing something, and police land, and police break in your door, and they come into your apartment, and then one of them gets up close to you and points a gun, and the hacker puts up his hands and then flips the cop off, and the cop punches him and knocks him out. And I was like, what a great way to start the remake of System Shock. But yeah, the art direction is really neat. It's like pixelated almost. If you look at it from afar, it just looks normal. But when you're playing the game, everything has a really interesting pixelated look about it. It's really neat. I love it a lot. The environments, so much of it feels like it was taken straight from the game, but was just made prettier. And just like the first game, it doesn't tell you much. You'll find a random like email that's like, in this room you can shut off the machine that makes machines, and if you don't find that email, you will have to fight robots for the rest of eternity. But yeah, I enjoyed it endlessly. I'm enjoying it endlessly, and hopefully it stays good, but it is difficult because it doesn't, if you don't find what you're supposed to find, it doesn't give a shit. And it's just going to be mean to you. And I think that is them partially staying true to the original System Shock, because the original System Shock was not nice. And this one is not either, but it is a lot of fun. Okay, so the two biggies. The big two now. Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. Connor, why don't you take Baldur's Gate 3. Go ahead.
Baldur's Gate 3 needed to do, or did everything it needed to do right. Not only has it introduced like CRPGs to a lot of people that haven't experienced them before, but it made people fall in love with CRPGs with just the dedication and heart that was poured into the game to make one of the best games to be released. And I don't think that's an exaggeration to say. Yeah, it has its flaws, but the depth and the scope that Larian Studios put into Baldur's Gate 3 puts it up there with the greatest games.
It's a landmark game.
Yeah,
We'll call it. And every now and again, we will have those landmark, like much like Resident Evil 4 is a landmark game, the original, much like original Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Mario 64, like those are landmark games. And I think Baldur's Gate 3. I haven't even played the goddamn game, but there's like, it's you'd be brain dead to argue that fact. I think just from watching anything about the game, anything about the conversation around not System Shock, Baldur's Gate 3, but System Shock 2 also in the early 2000s. But yeah.
I don't even, Baldur's Gate 3 is obviously extremely good. And it's one of those things where it's like, where do you begin? The characters are all extremely well written and well voiced and well acted and incredibly endearing and memorable. The gameplay is really in depth. It may be the best representation of like D&D a video game has ever done, tabletop D&D. All the stuff you can do, all the different ways you can take out enemies. If you pay attention, there's tons and tons of ways to do an action here or there. If diving into the design and how they did things it's going to create discussion for years and years because of how they did certain things, how they wrote certain quests, what they wanted the player to think about, whether it's time constraints or choices that the players make or whatever, and how all those things change the world and change your story. There's so much that goes into it. And on the other side, it's also incredibly just fantasy fulfilling, I guess. Because you meet Karlach and you're like, I kind of want to bang Karlach, and you can. It's not the most complicated thing in the world.
It's gonna hurt that.
At first, it will. No, but you gotta find a way to cool her heart, if you know what I mean. Actually, that's literally not. I literally mean you have to cool her heart. But it was the same thing with all the characters, Asterion, Shadowheart, and each of the game is about power. It's about very much like Lord of the Rings. It is your character is grappling with being at the precipice of this ultimate power, and what do you do with it? How does that reflect your character? How is it reflected in the other characters and their opinions on what to do? And of course, each of their stories is also about somebody abusing them or somebody more powerful than them taking advantage of them. So like Karlach was a warrior in hell, and she was forced to fight in wars for a really long time. I don't want to spoil anything, but like Gale has a connection to a god, and how does that change him? And all these characters are put into positions where they have to reconcile. They have to reconcile their attitudes toward power and their attitudes toward and whether or not they take that or whether or not they leave it behind and try to do something better with the world. And that's all really interesting. It's one of those games where I wish you could like romance everybody at once, so you could get all that dialogue.
Tyler,
and all that
you're
stuff.
Playing on PC. There are polyamory mods.
I'm sure there are, but I don't really want to do that because it would be like a 600-hour game. But just a way where you could experience.
It's already a 600-hour game, Tyler.
You could experience all that story. And all the different ways you can approach combat. You can break off Asterion as the rogue, so you can break off Asterion, hide him. Combat engages, so the people in your party are thrown into turn-based mode where they were, and you run around. It's real-time mode.
Yeah.
But Asterion is still in real-time mode.
Yeah, so you can kind of do whatever you want.
So figuring that out, one, from a development standpoint, must just be incredibly complex. Two, from a gameplay standpoint, figuring out how to take advantage of that is just like, it's incredible. Or, I don't know, if you're trying to steal something from somebody, you could have one character talk with them, and then that person looks toward the person that they're talking to. You can switch to someone else in your party, and that person will be locked in a conversation with that other character.
So you can't mess with them, yeah.
And then you can sneak as the other character or whatever. All kinds of stuff like that. So yeah, it's extremely good. Is there anything else you would like to say about Connor?
Too much. Too much for the end of this podcast. It'd be a podcast episode by itself.
Yeah, very true. Okay, and then last but not least, the greatest game ever made. Squad. No, I was kidding.
Spider-Man 2.
Richard,
Sorry.
I only have two things to say about Alan Wake 2, and that is show me the Champion of Light.
Oh, okay.
And I'll show you the Herald of Darkness.
Herald of Darkness, yeah.
So what do you have to say about Alan Wake 2?
It's a game that keeps giving, and recently giving even more with their new Game Plus add-on that produces new videos, new pages of script, and a whole new ending. Well, not whole new, but elongated, newer ending to Alan Wake, which in turn gives more questions. So everything from Remedy on this game was carefully crafted, from its environments, which is one of the most beautiful games I've seen like in this generation, to its stunning writing that not only invokes like curiosity but also just entertainment as well. Memorable characters, both returning and new, and a gameplay itself that has improved since the first game, but that's probably thankfully due to them having two more games in between that to kind of help with that, which I feel like I'm the only person who likes Alan Wake's combat, but whatever.
The first one?
Yeah.
I don't think the combat is bad. I just think it throws way too many enemies at you a couple times. Okay, well,
good. Damn.
All right, well,
you play Elden Ring.
You know what? Then we are going to talk about Squad.
No.
That's fine. No, but I don't think its combat is bad.
No.
I just think sometimes, do you really need to spawn a 80th guy with a scythe behind me, Remedy? I don't know. Apparently, Richard says yes.
Hey, you got a dodge button for a reason, buddy.
Oh, man. Okay, not to break your chain of thought.
I'm kidding. No, no. My train of thought is done. Excellent game and excellent performances all around. With every single character, both live action and voice actor. Because we have Ika Villi as Alan Wake, both in the live action, but Matthew Porretta as the voiceover, and then Sam Lake, of course, as Alex Casey, with James McCafferty as Casey as well.
And Max Payne.
and Max Payne, yeah.
let's not beat around the bush here. He's playing Max Payne.
And Director Trench, and
yes, yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited for the future of Alan Wake due to the game that they've released, and of course, once again, the questions that are brought forth with New Game Plus.
I don't even like with Baldur's Gate 3. I'm not even sure where to begin with Alan Wake.
And sorry,
no, go ahead.
Sorry, and it sucks because it's like I'm not. Each of these games that we have on this list, you can't choose, and this is why if somebody ever asks me, and I say this all the time, someone ever asks me what the greatest game of all time is, there is none.
Sure.
Like you can't possibly choose, because there are specific games that feed into what everybody is into, and you can't just say that one is above all of them. And so as much as I like Alan Wake 2, and as much as I think that like it was like the best game I played this year, like even me sitting here never even touching Baldur's Gate 3, I'm just like, God damn, that game is incredible. Like if I had played it, that my mind may have been changed as well. So it's I feel disingenuous sitting here gushing about Alan Wake 2 when you have other games that are just as good or may not even, or, even better. It's just, it fit my bill at that time. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Alan Wake 2 is maybe the most unique game I've ever played, I think. When I think about everything you do in the game, the artistic craziness it goes along with, there are points where it's just a survival horror game and you're shooting creepy enemies in the face. Mm-hmm. You really don't know what to expect, and that's part of the enjoyment of the game. Is it constantly surprises you with weird things, with tonal shifts, just complete tonal 90-degree turns where it's funny and weird, and then suddenly it's just terrifying. And that is so intoxicating to walk through. The environments are just breathtaking. Seeing that city for the first time, that rainy New York city.
Yeah, the dark place city, yeah.
Yeah, I assumed it was, it's New York, right? I think it's supposed to be New York.
Yeah, New York, yes, because that's where Alan Wake lives.
Walking through that with Alan, and he's got his pistol and his flashlight, it's just like, it's mesmerizing. When you're walking through the woods as Saga, it's super creepy. In the woods, suddenly you go through the threshold, and it goes from the woods to the dark place, and it's all very creepy.
Coffee World was terrifying.
Coffee World, yeah. The game it's corny, it's cheesy. At times, it's legitimately terrifying. You don't know what's real. The characters don't know what's real. And so everything's just constantly up in the air. And underneath that is a really solid foundation of just a solid survival horror game.
Yeah.
You got to manage your health items, got to manage your ammo. You have flares that can do more damage. You have a flare gun, whatever, what have you, all that stuff. Saga's got different weapons that do different damage. You can upgrade your weapons and whatnot. So you've got all that stuff that works really well. And yeah, I don't know what to say about the performances besides it's just like some of the best acting ever in a video game. That and Baldur's Gate 3. But I think when I think about like little tiny moments where it's just you kind of just sit back and let the game let it cook. And there's one I really liked where when you're playing as Alan Wake, you'll find you'll find the little bubbles that play an Alex Casey monologue, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And Alex Casey is that noir detective, and Alex Casey is simultaneously tracking a cult in a book that is similar to the cult that Saga is tracking down.
It's a parallel, yeah.
And it may be that the cult that Saga is tracking down, it was inspired by the cult that Alan Wake wrote, that Alan Wake is witnessing in the dark place. It's all very loopy and weird. But there's this one... I don't know why it stuck out to me, but there's just one monologue where as Alan Wake that you find, and it's at the top of a building, and you see a couple New York City buildings across the street, and it's raining, whatever. And you play the monologue, and the monologue starts with something like, Alex Casey goes, "They say God made us in his image. Well, if that's true, he's a cold, sadistic son of a bitch." And it's just this rough, extremely cynical noir detective, and just that entire ambience, that experience is just so good. And I was so sad when it was over because I was just like, that was so much fun not to know what to expect, to try and piece together what's going on. What are the themes here? Who is talking to whom? Alice's part, like everything is memorable. Alice's part, when you go to Alan Wake's apartment, and you see Alice's artwork and her story about being haunted and who's doing the haunting and what she finds out to do. It's just so engaging. And before that, you have Alan in the dark place, and you're switching environments, and the environment changes, and you have to figure out like where to go and stuff. and that whole time you're following Alex Casey's story and where that leads to, and it's just it juggles all that so perfectly. All those subplots, all those storylines. It juggles it perfectly. And then you go to Saga's story, and Saga has her own things going on about her daughter and her husband and the real Alex Casey.
And what's real and what isn't.
Fake or real, you don't know. It's so well done. The only thing I'm not a huge fan of is I don't know. There may be other interpretations here. I'm not a huge fan of like the FBC, I guess. Not because it's a cool concept. I just don't like how it just feels a little Marvel. Like, it's all set in the same universe. And
oh, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Not a big deal, I guess.
Instead of just being a like creepy psychological supernatural thing, there's an explanation to it.
Yeah, I guess. And
yes.
I guess some people like that.
And anything that happens and anything that they do, like,
you'll find like a piece of paper.
That's the center of it, is the FBC.
Yeah. It just kind of feels like, it feels like the connected, the thing where they like connect all the universes or whatever, all their games is cool. It's cool to think that Jesse Faden is out there somewhere and she I know that they encounter each other in the DLC or whatever, in the Control DLC somehow.
Oh, right? Yeah.
But it's cool to think that they're in the same universe, but that stuff just doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is like, I showed you guys that scene from Tropic Thunder because that's what I felt like. I felt like Remedy was like, what are we going to do with players? We're going to take them off the fucking grid. Like, just go completely nuts, just completely off the wall. And that's the stuff that I love. I was having the most fun on Alan Wake 2 when it was just complete insanity, just complete madness. And not all that madness was crazy. Sometimes it was you're in a movie theater and you're watching this horror movie that is telling Alan something. And it's just like, what? So awesome. Yeah. I wish I could play that game again. I watched that trailer so many times because I was so excited. And I was so happy that my excitement was satiated. Yeah. And I'll never get over some of the little moments of the game. She picks up, it's a horror story. We're in it, stuff like that. Is there anything else you would like to say?
Not about Alan Wake.
No. Okay. Well, we've gotten through all our games. We've gotten through all the stuff. Is there anything else you guys want to say before we get out of here?
So about killer frequency.
I got a couple more just highlights of games.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Throughout the year. Recently, much recently, The Finals was a very good first-person shooter. Very good destructibility, very reminiscent of Battlefield Bad Company 2, which we talked about during Battle Bit. Very important if you're interested, great. If you're not interested, that's also great. But the making of Karateka is
yes, that's one on my list.
Is something that's very cool. We are in a point now in the gaming industry where we can look back on certain developers or certain games and treat them as forms of art, and digital clips are at the forefront of doing that.
Yes.
Making of Karateka is only $20. Get to see design documentaries with Jordan Mechner, who created that game, and eventually Prince of Persia. So that's a great one. Final Fantasy Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line for the Switch, PS4, and I think Xbox, but great music rhythm game featuring pretty much all the music of all the Final Fantasies. If you're a fan of that, go play that. And of course, I have to mention Dead Cells Return to Castlevania.
Oh, yeah.
Great game of Dead Cells that did a stunning tribute to the Castlevania series. Very good. Go play it.
Oh, and then there was God of War Valhalla.
Yes.
Which was also excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Another fantastic DLC that dropped out of nowhere and was excellent. So there's that one too. Okay, what a year. What a
concept.
It just started.
What a the universe.
What a concept.
And I just want to say, if you put Alan Wake 2, Alan Wake 2 into 2, it'll be twice as long as the universe. You don't want to put Alan Wake 2 into 2. If you put Baldur's Gate 3 in a hot dog, and you put the hot dog bun in a bag, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, patreon.com/gamingdiscourse. We'll see you next week.
Bye.